This is a quick video to introduce the new routines that we've put in place in CRS Web to try and stop duplicates getting into Central. The method of getting records into Central is the same as it has been, but we've just introduced some more checks to try to prevent duplicates getting into Central. What I'm going to do in this video is show you how to add an ordinary record to Central that should go in with no problems. And then I'm going to create deliberately a duplicate that I'll also try and put into Central to show you what happens when duplicate records are posted from the live site. The process for adding a record to Central is the same as always. You should first have done a deduplication check on your segment to make sure that it's not a duplicate within your segment. If you're satisfied that it isn't, then to add the record to Central, you simply click the Central button here on the record in the bottom pane. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and immediately you'll see there's a slight change to the behavior in the top panel. So if I click the button to go into Central, you can see that instead of turning orange, it's turned light blue. And what that light blue means is that the record is currently being processed on the back end and checked to see whether it's a duplicate within the whole of the Central database. If it's not a duplicate, then the behavior reverts to exactly the same behavior as you're used to. So the record will come back with an orange flag, which means it's in Central, or it's flagged to go into Central at the next build, and it's got your SR tag on it. What I'm going to do now is manually create a duplicate of this record so that we can see what happens when we add that to Central. Okay, so I've now created that record and it's taken me into my recently updated records list, so I can see that the record is here and I can see that it's flagged as not in Central. So if I try to add that to Central in the normal way, just by clicking on the Central button, we'll see what happens. So immediately it turns light blue to say that it's looking in Central to find the record. And now you'll see that it's come back as dark blue, and that indicates that there's a problem with the record. And at the moment, that problem is only going to be that it's a potential duplicate. If it's a potential duplicate, then it will just stay marked as dark blue on your listing until you deal with it. It won't go into Central until it's been resolved as either a duplicate and merged with the record that it's duplicating, or you've said that it shouldn't go in because it's not appropriate for Central. So to deal with these records, there's a new tab which is up here, which is called the Central tab. If we click on that, to deal with this record, we need to go to the Central tab, which is a new tab in this release, and that lists all of the records that you've said should go into Central but have come back as potential duplicates. If we click on the Central tab, you can see that there's a few in here that have not been dealt with. The one that we've just added is this one down at the bottom. So if we wanted to just deal with this one, we can just click it. If we want to deal with all of the records, we can just go through them in turn. So if we click on that record, it takes you into a screen which is very, very similar to the deduplication screen. The difference is that you're merging Central records here, not merging your own reference records. So whatever values you choose will be the values that end up going live in Central. If we just talk through what the options are at this point, first of all, my record is the record that I've said I want to go into Central. That's on the left-hand side down here. And On the right-hand side is the record that that's matched up with as being a potential duplicate in central, and you can see that we've got the CN number at the top of the field here. You've got a couple of options on these headers. One is to add the record to your marked list, and you can do that for either or both of the records. And you would want to do that if you saw something in the records that you wanted to deal with later that you couldn't deal with in this screen. You would just mark them and then go back and fetch them from your marked list and work on them in whatever way you wanted to later on. The other is just to select all fields. So if you wanted to select all fields in either of the records, then you just tick that box. The automatic selection is the same as the standard deduplication automatic selection, so it will select fields that have a value over fields that don't have a value, and it'll select fields that have more content over fields that have less content. We know that that's not necessarily always the right thing to do, but in general it's a good starting point. In this case, we can see that a lot of the fields are identical because they're both selected. So a selected field is in white and an unselected field is in grey. If the fields are exactly the same, then it doesn't matter which one we're going to take, so we don't allow selection of those fields. What we can see is, if we go further down, is that there are some fields in the current central record that are not in the record that we want to bring into central. So we're going to select those from the central record. They've already been auto-selected. In central, the date published is a full date, so we're going to take that. There's a whole bunch of other stuff in here that's in the central record that's not in our record, and we want all of those values to be brought into the merged record. So if we're happy with that, we have the option to merge the record, which is up here. If we click that, that would merge those two records together in central and in CRSD. And at the next central build, whatever values I've brought across from my record would appear in the central record. In this case, I'm not bringing any across, but the principle's the same. Just a couple of other things to note on this screen that you can do. One is if you thought that this record was a genuine new record for central, so it was not a duplicate, you've got two options. One is you can say it's not a duplicate, in which case the record will go into central. Or you can say add to central and it'll add this record to central. And the reason for there being two options is if there were multiple potential duplicates, you would want to mark, or you may want to mark, one or more of them as not a duplicate rather than pushing this record into central. So that's the reason for those two buttons. If you decide that this record was just wrong, shouldn't go into central at all, you can mark it as not for central here. And it might be that the record has matched up with a potential duplicate in central, but for some reason doesn't meet the criteria for going into central, in which case you wouldn't want it to be matched again. So clicking not for central just takes it out of the list of potential duplicates. So if I go ahead and say merge records, it'll tell me what it's going to do. It'll say if you merge records, your group will be given ownership of the current central record. So your tag will be put onto that record and the two records will be merged. And it asks you if you're sure that you want to do that. If we say yes, you have the option to say don't show me this again. It's really there just to make sure that for the first time or the first few times that you do this, that you're aware of what's going to happen. But confirmations often get tedious if they're left there for too long. So you have the option to click don't show me this again, and then it won't show again. So if we go ahead and click yes, that merges the record and brings us back to the next record. And if you recall in the list of results, which is this list here, it's now selected the top one for us to go through and deal with. So if we just have a quick look at that record, see what we can see in this record that's different. Well, what we can see in this record is that this is a PubMed record because it's got a P PubMed identifier next to it. And for a PubMed record, you can't do very much. So the PubMed record is the master record. So all you can do in that case is to merge the two records together, and that would essentially remove this record from your data set and add this record to your data set. If we go back to the results page what you would do in practice is to work your way through these results to clear up the potential duplicates. If you see in this column that something has more than one duplicate, it's worthwhile having a look at that. If you click on the record, you could see that it's matched up in this case to 2 records already in Central. And if we look at the values in the fields, it looks as though they may not be duplicates. There's some oddities going on with this record and my record here. So it looks like the volume and the issue have been swapped. The pages look different, but the journal is the same, the year is the same, the authors are the same, and the title is close. This is one where we'd expect information specialists' domain knowledge to help sort out which the correct records are and which are duplicates and which are not. So in this case, just by way of example, I'm going to say that this is not a duplicate. So I'm going to take that one out of the batch. We know that it's an Embase and a PubMed record, so we can't change it anyway, but we don't think it's a duplicate of the record that I'm bringing in. So if you just click not a duplicate, again, it asks for a confirmation the first time I do it, but then you have the option to say, don't show me again. So I'm going to say, yep, mark it as not a duplicate. And at that point, we get back to the similar screen to the one that we've just gone through, where you can choose fields between the 2 records and merge them to create a full correct Central record. Or if you decide that they're not duplicates, you can either add the record as a new record for Central, or you can say, actually, no, I don't want this one to go into Central. And that's about it for the new Central routines. They're fairly easy to get to grips with, particularly if you've done a lot of deduplication, because the principle is almost exactly the same. The intention is that we stop duplicate records getting into Central, and that's something that information specialists have been asking for some time. If you find that these routines are overly cumbersome or stopping you doing anything that you need to do, then do get in touch. And the usual address is cissupport@cochrane.org. Thanks very much.